Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. Our PGA DFS writer at OccupyFantasy.com, Niromada, just took home a $100,000 top prize over on DraftKings this past weekend in PGA DFS for the WGC Match Play event. Now, this is Niromada's second big score in 2021. Back in January, he won $200,000 in NBA DFS, and he's one of the sharpest DFS players that I know. And hell, he's one of the smartest people that I know in general. And after his big win in January, we interviewed him and we got great feedback. People learned a lot from listening to Niromada's background and his approach to DFS. So if you like that episode, or you want to know how to improve your DFS game, how to learn more about building lineups or entries for DFS, or just improving your critical thinking skills, you'll enjoy this episode I did with Niromada after Sunday's win. We talk about his approach to the WGC Match Play event, his strategy for breaking down a unique contest type, and then we also talked about his bankroll analysis and what it means to move to that next level. Lots of great discussion in this episode. I think you'll really enjoy it. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Occupy Fantasy Podcast. You know me, I'm Brian, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, bringing in a special guest this time around, Niromada, PGA DFS writer at OccupyFantasy.com. Niro, what's up, man?
Hey, Brian. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Probably not as good as you're feeling. So for those of you listening who didn't see our tweet or aren't in the Discord channel, Nero won his second six-figure score of 2021. If you remember, we interviewed him back in January. He won the 200K in NBA DFS. But Nero, you finally lived up to the PGA DFS expert, and you won the 100K in PGA DFS this past week. And so my congrats to you.
Thanks, man. Yes, I was a little. I mean, it's hard to be disappointed after you win 200K. So let's be real that I wasn't actually that disappointed, but I was a little disappointed that I didn't do it in golf and I hadn't won any really big contests in golf. Like golf's why I got into DFS. That's what I do. That's that's my main sport. I do the content for Occupy for PGA. Like, it just was a little disappointing. And then, here we go. 2 months after that, like, boom, I get the big golf win. So that was super satisfying.
Yeah, and if you read the PGA plug in the intro, we say that Nero is a top 75 PGA DFS player, and Nero, I think that's cemented now for a while. We don't have to worry about changing that. It was getting sketchy there for a second. We might have to change this to top 100, top 150, but I think top 75 is pretty safe now.
Yeah, I think for those of you who are not privy to Brian and I's side chats, which would be all of you, I would give him a hard time because when I would slip out of the top 75 of the Roto Grinders rankings for PGA DFS, I'd be like, "Hey, man, you're being a liar again. I'm not in the top 75. I'm in like 95th place now." Or something like that. But yeah, now I think I will be able to stay in that top 75 for the rest of the year. So should be safe on that intro.
Awesome. It's so amazing to see that. And for this week especially, because it felt like the ultimate Occupy week, in that game theory was such a huge component. Obviously you have to predict what's going to happen on the golf course, but the game theory aspect of building lineups and being unique and understanding the full rules of the competition and the DFS contest were just so much more important this week than in years past or in other events. And it was funny, the timing, and because the NCAA tournament just started and the WGC Match Play, the event that you won, was a bracket style contest, just like March Madness. And actually, is that coincidental, or does the PGA do that because March Madness is happening this time of year?
It's a good question. I don't think it's coincidental. They have done the match play at the same time of year for at least 10 plus years now. The current format has only been going on for the last 3 or 4 years. They used to seed everyone literally 1 through 64, just like the NCAA tournament, and it was single elimination right from the jump. Just like it is in the NCAA tournament. That's not quite the case anymore. But yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence at all. They want something that captivates the public's attention in the same way that that March Madness does. Obviously, it's not anywhere near the same level, but it's a very similar contest structure for sure.
Right. Well, it's perfect for our content purposes because I spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks optimizing strategy for these really large bracket competitions. DraftKings is hosting a really big one, and a lot of the concepts applied to this match play event, and you laid them out in the daily plug. So this interview is going to have two separate parts. This first part, we're going to talk about game theory, bracket strategy, and really just understanding DFS and any type of games, competitions, events, understanding the rules and what that means for your entries. And then in the second part of this, because you're now $300,000 richer, we'll talk about analyzing your bankroll, analyzing your play, jumping to the next level, and what that means for most DFS players. So let's start with this first part, this game theory and bracket strategy. And Niro, your plug was so good in the sense that it really showed that you understood the concept of the match play event, and then secondarily the DFS competition itself, because it is two different things, like understanding the event and then understanding what you need to do as a DFS player to have the most success. So in DFS contests, there's two things, right? There's either maximizing points, which sounds like the thing we want to do the most, or it's maximizing win probability, which sounds the same, but it's a little bit different. Sometimes we have the same goal, maximizing points and win probability, but in this event, it's different. So I wanted to talk a little bit to you about you looking at this contest in this event and how you analyzed it from a high level to figure out the optimal approach.
Yeah, cool. Like I like that. I'll go through it. I hope it correlates in some way to what you do for March Madness. I'll probably have a couple questions for you as I'm going through, because I want to see if you do similar things for your bracket stuff. Obviously, the outcomes are a little bit different, but similar in that you're trying to get the players or the teams that are going to be there at the end. So when I first started going through the research to write the plug for the match play, this is, I think, the third year that DK has offered contests on the match play. They used to not offer match play contests. They used to just be a no-go anywhere. DK is still the only site that offers match play contests. The other sites ran contests, and so did DK for the alternate PGA event last week that was in the Corrales in Punta Cana. But DK is the only site that did the match play stuff. So this was, I think, was the third year that I've played it. So I had a little practice. It kind of come to understand it. And the biggest thing was literally like going through the rules and going through the scoring. So the biggest difference in scoring in the match play is you win points for holes won, matches won, holes halved, so holes that you tie, and matches that you tie. You lose points for losing a hole, and that's it. Then you can win bonus points for consecutive holes won in a match. And then for every hole that's left that you haven't played because you already beat your opponent, you get points. And if you don't lose any holes in the match, you actually get 7.5 points, which is more than even you would get for winning the match. But the key thing there is there are no finishing position bonuses given at all. So in most DK golf contests, you get 30 points for finishing first, 20 points for finishing second, and on down the list. And that's what makes sweating golf on a Sunday so infuriating sometimes, because the swings are just huge. A guy can make a bogey, drop from first down to seventh, and all of a sudden he literally loses 20 plus DK points just out the window. But in the match play, it became very clear to me that like I don't care as much about the winner. What I really care about is the final four. If I get the final four right, then I can win, because there is no bonus for actually winning the whole thing. It's just like, I just want guys who are going to play the most matches possible, because I get so many points for winning holes within a match. You win 3 points for winning a hole. You only win 5 points for winning the match. So it's literally just like, give me the guys that are going to play the most holes. Well, the guys that are going to play the most holes are going to be the guys that are in the final four. But the quirky thing is they play a championship match and a consolation match after they play the semifinal match on Sunday morning. So all four of the final four players are guaranteed to play 2 matches on Sunday, win or lose. And DK is telling you, well, you shouldn't care if they win or lose, because they're not giving you, if they win the championship or win the consolation, you still get 5 points. So, I was like, don't worry about anything else. Can I get a roster of 6 players that has the final 4 and then at least 6 of the elite 8? So 6 of the final 8 on my roster, which means I have to plan out my brackets in advance and basically march the guys through that I think are going to make it, and then pick. So if I've got 5 guys left, which regions are represented, and is there one region that's not? There better not be. And then grab somebody out of that, no matter what their price is. So I don't care how much money I leave on the table, and put them on that lineup. To your point about maximizing win equity, like that maximizes my ability to win a GPP. It does not maximize my ability to score points. And I don't care about scoring points. I only care about giving myself the best opportunity to win the GPP. So last thing I'll say on this one, and then I have a question for you, Brian. So my order of like operations of what I want to do for all of my entries was, number 1, make sure that I can have the final 4 and 6 of the elite 8 on all of my DK entries. And that's just playing things out in the brackets. So make sure I'm not taking guys that will play each other in the second round of the tournament. Like all of my guys had to be able to kind of march forward so that they could only play each other in the elite 8, and then 4 of them could form the final 4. Number 2, make sure it accounts for the historical fact that only a third of the top 16 seeds make it into the Sweet 16. So the one quirk on this is they put 16 different pods of 4 players each. They seed those pods. Those guys play each other 1 match a day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the winners of those pods form the Sweet 16. Well, historically, the top seed in each of those pods, only a third of the time are they moving forward to make it to the Sweet 16. So I wanted my lineups to reflect that. And then the last piece, which is usually my most important piece in a regular week of golf, was to leverage projected ownership and make sure that I had 2 lower owned players on each of my lineups. But if I couldn't do that, then that was okay. And in most tournament, building lineup scenarios, that would be the complete opposite. Like that would be one of the things I made sure I had. So, I wanted to get rid of some of those top seeds, 2/3 of them, and then build my lineups accordingly. So, my question for you, Brian, was like, when you're doing your brackets for March Madness, are you doing a similar planning scenario where you are trying to figure out like which top seeds you want to eliminate and then advance, the other teams forward? Are you just, throwing out other seeds, playing an 8 seed all the way through to the final just because it's contrarian? Like how do the way you approach a March Madness bracket either the same or differ from how I approached the match play bracket for golf?
Hey, so just a quick pause to the interview to ask you for a favor. If you're not already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do so by clicking the subscribe button below this video. That'll get you notified whenever we go live to break down a slate before it starts, or if we upload any new videos here on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, we always appreciate that. And if you're looking for another way to support us, you can click the join button below this video to join our YouTube membership. It's just $2.99 per month, and that gets you access to our Discord channel where you can chat with all of our members and our staff about DFS. All right, back to the interview.
Golf.
Yeah, it's honestly very similar, and the biggest thing is knowing the rules. So I'm in 2 big bracket pools this year, and one is the DraftKings one, and there's another one, and the scoring systems are completely different. In the DraftKings bracket pool, you get 10 points for a round 1 win. But the champion, if you get the champion correct, it's 320 points. So the champion's worth 32 times more than just a regular round 1 win. So to me, with no upset points, no benefit to picking upsets. So to me, it was, I don't need to get cute in the first couple rounds. Just do well enough, get 60, 75% of my picks right. Just be in the top half of the field when it comes to those early round picks, and I'll be fine. The way it works, the champion in the final 4 is so important on DraftKings, and it was a 13,000 player bracket field. I thought it might get up to 20,000. That was the limit. It was massive overlay, but the fact is, because the scoring is exponential. If you get a unique Final Four and champion and you get all those picks correct, you're pretty much guaranteed the million. Just because
Yeah.
if no one else has that, you're guaranteeing the 320 for the champion, the 160 for the finalist, and the other 240 for the final 4 points. And no one else can catch you, no matter how well they did in the early rounds. So for me, my plan was, all right, let's look, how can I get a unique Final Four plus a champion that's not that different? And the fact that there's only 13,000 entries, you would think that you would have to get pretty crazy in the Final Four. But most of my entries included 1 and 2 seeds in the Final Four. It wasn't that crazy to get unique unless you played Gonzaga as the champion. They were, 35% picked to be the champion. So to me, that was the biggest thing. And it's not even that big of a hurdle to do that. And now we're recording this Monday before the Elite Eight starts. I have 1 to 3 lineups that are live. I give myself probably a 3 to 5% chance of taking it down, which is, I think I would take that at this point if I knew that. But in the other pool, there's points for upsets. And the scoring, instead of being exponential, is this 1 for the first round, 2 for the second round, 3 for the third round, 4 for the fifth round, so on. The champion's only worth 6 points. So if I get the champion right, but if you get 6 more picks right in the first round than me, you win. So that's a completely different approach. So Nero, it's really about knowing the rules and what's most important to having a winning lineup.
I like that. So my immediate question is, who is your Final Four?
So for my most live lineup is it's Gonzaga, Baylor, Houston, Michigan. So 3 1 seeds and a 2 seed, which isn't that crazy. The unique part of it is I have Michigan over Houston in the championship, which I think 8 to 9% of people have Michigan as champion. 4 to 5% people have Houston in the final. So the way I've planned it out and I've looked through the standings, if that happens, if those teams make the Final Four and that championship happens, I'm guaranteed the million. And at this point, it's a 3 to 5% chance of happening. But again, I'll take that in a field of 13,000 people.
Of course, if I had given you that scenario on day one, you would have immediately signed up for that, like no questions asked.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was hoping for. If I got to this point and if I get the Final Four and champion right, no one else is going to compete with me. And I don't have to worry about what my first 3 rounds picks did, because if I get this, I'm guaranteed it. So
yeah, that feels a lot like the thing I had noted it in the plug. You and I have talked about it before as being, one of those key tenets of DFS, and that's minimizing the number of things you need to get right in order to win something. So, like, if I'm listening to you, I'm hearing you say like a lot about, I just need to get the Final Four right, and essentially I win based on the way that the scoring's set up and the way the contest rewards, picking the teams that get towards the end versus your other contests where they're picking upsets along the way. And it was very similar to what I was trying to do in my bracket stuff was, if I can just get the Final Four right, I don't care who wins or loses after that. Like, if I got that right, that's it. Like, that's all that I need to do. Now, obviously, I can hear people listening to this laughing. It's much easier said than done to do that. But that's what it sounds to me like what you were trying to do in those bracket entries that you put in.
Yeah, and there are various ways to accomplish this, right? And whether it's, let's say I think Gonzaga's a lock for the Final Four, I put them in all 20 of my brackets in the Final Four, get different after that. If I think Houston is undervalued compared to what the field's doing, have them in more Final Fours than the field. It's very similar to DFS. Now, a way you were able to accomplish this, and a way you were able to try to minimize the number of things you need to get right, which if you take away one thing from this podcast, you're listening, this is the most important concept of DFS and the way we play it at Occupy. You don't have to drill down into player projections, get into the nitty gritty. If you can just nail a couple of win conditions, a couple of scenarios that if they happen, you're going to be at the top of the leaderboard, then you're in really good shape. So for you, you named a strategy called the lock and wheel, and you talked about it in the plug, and you implemented this strategy for your PGA DFS contest. Talk to me about that and what that means.
So, yeah, I took it from like horse racing. Those of you who have bet on horse races before, you could like bet a exacta where you feel good about the horse that's going to win, but you don't know about who's going to finish second. And so you just wheel the horse with the rest of the field. Essentially, you're making as many exacta bets as there are horses in the field, where you lock the one horse into the first position, and now no matter who finishes second, you're going to have a winning ticket. So in that case, obviously, you're rooting for the highest odds horse that there is to finish second place to maximize your payout. In this scenario, what I was really focused on was, can I lock up like half of the bracket? So if I look at a bracket, I've got 4 players that need to advance to the final 4. Can I take just one half of that bracket and say these two, I'm confident these 2 players are going to make the final 4, and then build a bunch of lineups that don't change that assumption, but do change all the other assumptions on the other side of the bracket. So can I find, what different combinations can I get to surround these other 2 that I feel like are locking up the one side of the bracket? And I liked that idea because, primarily it meets that condition of it minimizes the amount of things I need to get right. So in my particular example, I did it with Jordan Spieth and Jon Rahm. By the way, neither one of them made the final 4. So I was wrong again. Just like I was on my NBA lineup with the Hawks and the Hornets and Gordon Hayward and DeAndre Hunter. Like, I was wrong, but the concept still allowed me to win. So I made 50 lineups in total. 20 of them had Spieth and Rahm locked in on the one side of the bracket, and then I found 20 different combinations of the other 4 players that I thought could make up the Elite 8, and then the final 2, aka the final 4 on that other side of the bracket. And so for me, it's just like, okay, well, if Spieth and Rahm play well and they get to the final, like, I'm in great shape. And that's not crazy for me to think that Jon Rahm is one of the best players in the world. He's a great match play player. Spieth, great match play player, playing a lot better these last couple of weeks. That's he's from Austin. He knows the course well. Like, this isn't a stretch for me to do that. And now I'm like, okay, great. I put those 2 in, and now I've got 20 chances at getting the rest of it right, if only that one scenario unfolds, and it's not an incredibly unlikely scenario.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I do got to say, the fact that you have some sort of horse racing degeneracy at the track somewhere in your background brings me great joy to bring up that analogy. So I will say that. But 2, just a great way to think about it, a great way to minimize what you need to get right. And sometimes even if you don't get it right, you can still win. That's the best part about it. And now I think a lot of people here, because NCAA brackets come around once a year, the match play very rare, comes around once a year, twice a year, whatever it is. So people want to know, how can they carry this type of concept over to other daily fantasy sports, other contests. So Niro, any thoughts on whether it's NFL, Showdown, NBA, any other sport, minimizing the number of things you need to get right to help you win?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing that you can do in all of those instances is take a stand. Figure out a place where you want to get leverage, and then build lineups accordingly. So in PGA DFS, there's a lot of different. If you study the top players, there are various ways to allocate your player pool. But 2 of the more popular ways would be to take somewhere between 2 to 4 players and be pretty heavy on those 2 to 4 players, and then fill out your pool with the rest of your players. So in that case, you're taking a stand on those 2 to 4 players. You're probably going to get 3 to 4 to 5, maybe even 10x the field on those 3 to 4 players. And you're basically saying, hey, if these 3 to 4 players play well, I'm going to have a very good week. And that's a lot easier than trying to predict, 1 through 6 on the leaderboard in all kinds of different scenarios. There's also a bit of the flip of that, which is, to kind of build in very flat allocations, meaning that I'm not going to own any one golfer more than, let's say, 25%, 30%, 20%, something like that. But I'm going to have a lot of those guys at the top. So instead of having 2 to 4 guys where I have, that concentrated ownership, instead I'm going to have like maybe 10 guys that are spread out at 25%. But the key is that at least 2 to 3 to 4 of those 10 guys are projected for less than 5% ownership. So now I've got these pockets within this flat allocation. So I'm not taking on as much risk as I am in the other model. but I've got places where I've taken a stand, and I'm saying again, these 3 to 4 players, these players do well, then I'm going to have a good week. And you play more of the other sports than I do, Brian. So you could probably speak to how it translates to other sports better than me. But for when you say that to me, what I think of in golf is taking a stand in your player allocations.
Yeah, and that concept applies to all sports. It really does. So that makes a ton of sense in golf. And if you're an NFL showdown player, maybe it's taking a stand on which player is going to be the highest scoring player. So on DraftKings, you make a couple lineups. You say, all right, Tyreek Hill, I'm predicting to be the highest scoring player. If he is the highest scoring player, now I'm in the top 10% of lineups. I have a chance to get some combination right. Or let's say you're playing on FanDuel and it's a Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes slate, and you're thinking, I can win if Mahomes or Lamar scores 3 to 4 touchdowns, but one of those touchdowns is to a backup tight end or fullback, and I'm rotating in those 1% owned players. If that hits, now I'm near the top of the leaderboard. I just need to get a combination right. Same thing if you play MMA, and we've been talking about that a lot lately. Find one of my strategies, find one of the lower owned players, 20% or fighters 20% owned or less, that you think the field is lower on than they should be. Go heavy on them. If they score more than they're supposed to, now you're ahead. Only 20% of the lineups have them, 10% of the lineups have them. Now you just need to get your combinations right around those fighters. So there are lots of ways to play it, but I think the key really what it comes down to is taking a stand, having leverage on it. It doesn't have to necessarily be a low owned player or scenario, but just having more than what the field has and building around that win condition.
Exactly. So if you look at my lineup, that won was Rahm, Spieth, Henley, Scheffler, Harmon, and Horschel. None of those players were, exceptionally low owned. Obviously, the ownership dynamics are a little bit different in the match play, where there's only 64 players to choose from versus a regular PGA Tour stroke play event. But the point is that if you look at my player pool allocations, I had more than the field, I believe, on every single one of those players. And obviously it was different. I had more Spieth and Rahm than anyone else. And Spieth was like 10, 11% owned. Rahm was almost 25 plus, so I had like 6x the field on Spieth and, maybe 2x the field on Rahm. But Rahm's the highest owned. I think he was the highest owned player across all of the match play. Yet I still had leverage on the field because of the way I allocated my player allocations.
Yeah, exactly. And you may not get as much leverage from Rahm, but if you identify
Right.
that as a situation that needs to be leveraged, it still counts all the same. And the way you're building lineups are still going to be unique despite having a high owned golfer in them. So kudos to you identifying that strategy and employing that strategy to perfection. So, all right, let's move on to the second part of this podcast, the nitty gritty details, what we're all about here at Occupy Fantasy, bankroll management, contest selection. And Niromada is a great case study for those of you, not necessarily win 300K in 3 months, but you win a league or your bankroll moves to the next level. And that could be from $50 to $100, $100 to $500, whatever it is. The actual number doesn't matter. But the fact that if your bankroll increases by X% or decreases by X%, what does that mean for your contests and the play and your DFS allocation? So, Nero, you and I were actually talking about bankroll stuff right before this week happened. So talk to me about your recent bankroll analysis before the 100K and what you were working through.
Yeah, I stayed, as I talked about in the first podcast, my goal was to stay responsible with my allocations. I feel like I did that. So, for example, I'm mostly like a 3% of my bankroll each week in golf, maybe 5% for the majors. There's tons of variance in golf. I'm trying to be responsible with it, and I didn't change that. But I roughly doubled my bankroll after my win in January. So okay, great. I'm being nice and responsible. And then, as so often happens after a big win, like I was just terrible. So my February ROI across all sports was minus 52%. Again, that's not screenshot life. That's real life.
Wait,
And that is
just minus 52%? I'm jealous. That's all it was?
Yeah, right. That's all that it was. Again, as you can see, Brian embraces more risk than I do. But that was the single worst ROI percentage that I had all throughout my roto tracker, every single, like on a month by month basis, going back to 2014. So, and if you just look at the 8 weeks in between the wins, the ROI was like minus 40% across all sports. And my golf was minus 35% during that time. So it was driving most of the poor performance. But the problem was, like, I was now losing money at a much greater rate than I was used to losing because I had essentially, doubled my bankroll. And so it really bothered me in a way that it wouldn't have bothered me previously because I hadn't quite like mentally and emotionally adjusted to the amount that I was playing each week, and to realizing that, like, when you do that, what you're really doing, you're riding the roller coaster all the time in DFS. You increase your bankroll, and what you really do more than, let's say you stay the same as a player, you just steepen the curve that the coaster goes up, and you steepen the decline that the coaster goes down. And it takes a while to get used to that. And I certainly, was not used to it. So it's like, it didn't, it wasn't as bad because obviously I had the huge win. And so that still was, making me looking like I was having a good year, but I wasn't super happy with how I was playing. During that time, I'd also flipped to no longer being a lifetime profitable player on DraftKings, as embarrassing as that is to admit for how long I've played on DraftKings. But like that also didn't feel good. Like that it didn't motivate me to want to keep playing. So I was questioning everything that I was doing. I also noticed, going through my roto tracker, that all of my lifetime profits have been accumulated in contests that are priced at the 3-3 to the 5-5-5 level. So like, why is that? What am I doing playing other contests? What am I doing in those contests that's so good? Is it just variance in contest sizing? Like, did I make a mistake increasing my bankroll? Should I quit playing on DK? Should I stop playing in contests that are not in that price range? And the thing that bothered me the most was, I have a personal rate of top finishes. So for everyone out there, if you want to use Roto Tracker, if you can, or try to calculate your top finish it percentage across your GPPs, or if you're specializing in a particular sport. But for me, 2.2% of all of my GPP entries finish in the top 1% of contests. That's my historical rate,
which is really good.
But
by
in
the
20,
way, just really quick, that's really good.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I never find any information on that stuff anywhere. So like, I would never know, like, is that good? Is it bad? I mean, I know beating the field, beating more than 1% is good. But anyway, I had, in 2021, that was down to 0.7%. So like, what was that? Was that small sample size? Had I changed as a player? Was I now, worse all of a sudden after the big win? Like, I was just questioning, all of this stuff. And, I think I would look to you, Brian, a little bit as someone who, does this professionally, does it at a higher level than I do. Like, getting all of that information, how would you analyze that? Right. And I think for anybody listening, because I'm just talking in, percentages and whatever, it's all applicable. It doesn't matter if your bankroll is 5K or 500 or 50K. It's all the same because it's just percentages and percentage increases or decreases.
I mean, this is the toughest part. And this is why we try to talk about this as much as we can, because you really don't hear it as much in the DFS industry. You just see the screenshots. You don't hear about the valleys in between. We've posted some links to tweets from professional players who do occasionally talk about the valleys and how tough it is mentally. But yeah, if you're a high risk player, right? You and I were playing GPPs every week, right? We're not grinding cash games. We're going to see massive swings just because of the nature of the beast. And it's your immediate thought is, wow, I just suddenly got worse, right? Like, there's no other explanation at this point. I was really good. And it's part of that cycle we talked about last time. It's, I'm the greatest player in the world. I just won 6 figures. I'm the best DFS player there is, for sure. Then you lose a little bit. It's like, this is really unlucky. I can't believe this. And then the stage 3 of that cycle is denial. This is bullshit. I can't believe this is happening. How has this many losses in a row happened? And then it gets to stage 4. I'm actually never going to win again. I don't even think I'm good at DFS anymore. And then the cycle starts over. You hit big, and this is you now. I'm the greatest DFS player that ever lived. I'm the best, and that cycle will just continue for eternity. And I've personally
Yep.
gone through this, right? Like this
Yep.
cycle continues all the time. I've won 100K in MMA in January or February, whatever it was. I've lost 19 straight League of Legends slates since. To me, is that am I just suddenly the worst League of Legends player in the world? I mean, I guess it's
Yeah.
possible. I still don't know much about League of Legends, but looking at the metrics I look at, looking at the metrics you look at, I'm still getting leverage where I want to be. And most importantly, Nero, I think this is the number one indicator of if you've gotten worse suddenly, or the field has improved much higher than you are, or if it's just pure unluckiness, is are you predicting what the field's going to do accurately? Every League of Legends
Mm-hmm.
contest I've played, I know what the field's going to do. And if I can get leverage here, here's my 1 win condition, here's my 2 win conditions. If it happens, I'm going to win this 3-3-3 or whatever it is. My win conditions aren't happening, but I'm accurately predicting what those win conditions need to be. MMA, am I accurately predicting who the field's going to be high and low on? Yes, I am. So eventually I'm going to hit. Eventually some luck's going to turn my way. So for you, Nero, during this time, and I imagine because I know you're looking at this, were you predicting correctly who the high owned and low owned golfers were going to be? If you're playing any other sports, were you accurately predicting what you needed to do to win? And those wins probably didn't happen, of course, but were you predicting what needed to happen correctly?
Yeah, and I hope that the people who are out there who read the plug would agree with me that I would say during that time I was still doing a good job of predicting who the sharp players were going to be on, who the better plays were going to be, each week. Where the OF model was still doing a good job of projecting ownership, my tweaks on that ownership, kind of my instinctual feelings were still pretty good, and were usually, well, I'll say they were more right than wrong. So I feel like I was still doing a good job of doing that. My expected fantasy points for my plays in the plug was still very high. Just my tournament finishes were trash. They were just terrible. And it's funny because emotionally you say, am I just now a terrible League of Legends player? And I laughed because to me that's laughable that you would even say that about yourself. But to you, you would absolutely begin to doubt it, just like I did
Right.
when I was in that valley, just like I will doubt it when I'm in the next valley. Like that's the way that it goes. But you get that outside perspective, and it's literally laughable to me that you would say that. But it's no surprise that you would feel that way on the inside. That like, man, no, I think I might be terrible now at League of Legends. Like I can't do this anymore.
It's the self-doubt, right? It's all the self-doubt because you're the one who sees every piece of information. It's nice to get that outsider perspective, like you said, because I know you as a player, you know me as a player. We see the pros. We know that they're probably not suddenly the worst player in the world unless
Right.
something dramatically has changed in how DFS works, or like something has changed in their process or their life to where they can't, attribute the time needed to be a good DFS player. Whereas, that's not the case. That's certainly not the case, and it's just something to be aware of, and for everyone out there, because if you never lose in DFS, then you're just a liar because everyone loses. You're going to lose often. The best players lose extremely often. And if you're listening to this now, Niromada, we just talked about, won 300K and 100K, and in that 2 month period in between, lost 50% of his entries or his entry fees, whatever it was. Me, I've won the million. I've won, six figures multiple times, but in between that, I've had extreme loss stretches, and that's natural. And if it happens to us, and not to pat ourselves on the back, but us who analyze this every single day at a very high level and a very intricate level, if it happens to us, it's 100% going to happen to you. So just being able to deal with that and understand that it's a possibility is so important. So Nero, I mean, you've looked at their bankroll. Now you have the 100K added to your 300 or your 200K from before. Have you made a decision or analysis on when to move to that next level? You mentioned you've been profitable between the 333 and 555 entry fee range. Any thoughts on moving up, moving down levels based on your success?
Yeah, I think that my sweet spot is probably in that 333 to 555 range. My my historical win rate percentages of finishing in the top 1% is high enough that I think, it's a, well, I'll say it this way. The best example would be what just happened. So that entry that I won this past weekend with was in the $555 GPP on DK, 600 entries. That same entry finished in 40th place in the giant GPP of 70,000 entries, and and that one had the first prize of 200K. But where I'm going is I think I do a good job of putting in, top 1% lineups. Where I'm not as good as you, Brian, is putting in like that even, that thinner crust, not even better than that top 0.1% of lineups that you really need to take down those giant GPPs. I think just my natural building style means I take on more risk in almost, all other entries into that 600 entry GPP, which is good. But I'm probably not taking enough risk. Again, these are very extreme differences, but in those giant contests, because especially in golf, like I'm so into the golf scene, like that is just not, the way that I'm thinking. So, I'm giving serious thought to, playing not necessarily exclusively, but close to exclusively in that price range, in that contest sizing, just because I think the way that I think about and create lineups is best suited for my own, personal style. And I know that means that's more weeks where, I'm just gonna start Saturday morning with having no shot to win anything because I only made 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 lineups this week. But like that's making a professional like investment type of decision. Am I just trying to get the action out of this, or am I trying to, make money and be profitable? And to your point, as long as I feel like I'm still correctly projecting, who those best plays are, what the field is going to do, what the sharper players are going to do each week, then I should be okay because it's the sharper players that are in those contests. And I think that's the biggest change that I will make. I will probably add a little bit more to my bankroll, but I don't know about too much because I'm still getting used to, riding a more severe angle up and a more severe angle down. I'm still not, comfortable yet internally add a ton more bankroll to that to steepen those curves, even further. Maybe somewhere down the line I will be, but as of today, I don't think I'm quite ready for that.
Yeah, it's twofold, right? You have to have the money to be able to do that, but then two, you have to have the comfort level to be able to do that and deal with it. And a lot of people who win a big prize and immediately up their play fall victim to that. And not just the fact that they're immediately playing better competition, but the fact that they also have to deal with these much, much, much bigger swings, and that causes much poorer decisions on their part.
Yep.
And so it's really tough. And I'll bring this all full circle as we end this episode. This win in a 600 player GPP, your results in the 333 through 555 range, like Nero, should it really surprise you? Because when you and I first met and we were talking and discussing results, you were kind enough to share with me some of your better and worse results in your contest types. Your best contest type when we first talked was these mid-sized GPPs, smaller GPPs, 500 to 2,000 people. The fact that your NBA win was just over that, 2,400 people, and now your big golf win was 600 people, like that really shouldn't be surprising. It just really cements the fact that you honed in on what you're good at in DFS, and two of your biggest wins have come in those contest types.
Right. It shouldn't be surprising, yet it took me winning those big prizes to really cement it and knock it home. Which just goes to show you that, because most of the content I consumed was around like you play the cash games and then you play the super high risk stuff, and like that's what you're playing, and the cash helps lessen your variance, and then MME all the super high risk stuff and chase the giant prizes, and that maybe I could eventually become that type of player, but I think my natural playing tendency, which was obvious, 18 plus months ago, is still the same today. And it's only now that I think I will really be like embracing that style of play. So just kind of funny that way.
Amazing. Amazing to hear. So, Nero, any final thoughts? Any wisdom you want to impart on the people before we get out of here?
No, just thank you to everyone that's out there that subscribes to Occupy, reads the plug, any of that people in Discord, giving me shout outs and support. Thank you to those folks. And I think the one thing I didn't shout out last time was my family and my friends who
How dare
have
you?
been supportive of. Yeah, right. No, who have been very supportive of me doing my DFS stuff. That's not limited to my wife and my immediate family and some close friends that have kind of been along for the ride. Their support's been super meaningful, as has yours and everyone at Occupy. So thank you to all of those folks.
Absolutely. So congrats again to Niromada, our PGA DFS writer at OccupyFantasy.com, for taking home $100K in PGA DFS this week. If you want to support us and read Niromada's daily plug, OccupyFantasy.com/membership is where you can become a member. Talking about fantasy, get access to all of our models and daily plugs. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube if you're watching the video version of this interview. Get notified whenever we release a latest episode. If you want to talk to Niromada in the Discord or any of our other members or any of our other staff, you can go to occupyfantasy.com/discord for instructions on how to join. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just click the join button right below the video to get access to our Discord channel. So for Niromada, I'm Brian from Occupy Fantasy. Appreciate everyone listening, and good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.